Yeah, yeah. Oh, I look rough. I'm gonna start using retinol cream on my eyes. How about that for an embarrassing time? Look at that. Jeez. And I got sleep.
David, are you excited about your grand finale?
Well, it depends on what you mean by grand finale.
Well, this is your last go around, right? You gotta go out with a bang.
Dude. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, I'm excited.
Are you in Florida right now?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying something about that. How's that going?
I ate at a Michelin star restaurant last night, Mercantile, down at Union Station. Had outstanding food. Um, and we're being recorded now. And my wife is giving a presentation to a national conference right now. And it is her birthday.
Oh, nice. Tell her happy birthday.
I will. It's part of the reason I'm here. She wanted, okay, I'll start video.
Hi, David.
Jan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm here.
Are you in Florida?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Oh, good. I love Denver.
Oh, yeah. It's a beautiful city with wonderful food and great shopping and nice people.
I love Cherry Creek area. That's my
Oh, my
favorite.
gosh. Oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yes, it is. My favorite cousin is the head of criminology at University of Colorado, Denver. And she also has a cabin up here. Well, she lives right off of downtown, and then they have a cabin in the mountains. Yeah, I see we're streaming. Okay, got it.
Okie dokie.
There's a barbecue tomorrow night for my wife's birthday at her house, so that's what we're.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Just letting you all know, I'm on the way to Savannah, Georgia. So 20 or so minutes. And so there'll be like random times where my camera will be off because I don't want to be distracting to the meeting.
This is the special budget approval meeting. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Regent Bell.
Present.
Regent Law. Present. Regent Brindley.
Present.
Regent Roddy.
Present.
Regent Dennison. Present. Chair Middleton.
Here.
Regent Nichols. Present. Regent Spiller.
Present.
Secretary Thomas. Vice Chair West.
Present.
And Regent Curtis.
Present.
And we have, 11 here. We have.
I want to welcome all of you who are participating by Zoom this morning. Thanks for being here. And I want to welcome in person, Regent Linda Ball. She has, of course, been participating with us by Zoom, but it's good to have her here in person.
Thank you.
As is indicated by the roll call, we have three regents that are participating by Zoom, and the rest are present in person. The first item on the agenda this morning is the approval of the 24-25 operating budget. Regent Brody and I discussed this before the meeting. We have kind of overlapping responsibility as far as presentation of this item, I guess you'd say. And he and I agreed that I would kind of chair this part of it. And I understand our president wants to make some comments before we begin and before we get Susan give the presentation.
So, thank you, Chair, and to the Finance Committee, thank you very much for your questions. I want to begin with thanking the staff for the work that they've done over the past 2 months to assemble a budget. This was one of our more interesting cycles, is the way I'd say it, in that we had some choices to make that are strategic choices for the institution. And I'm really proud of how this all came together. I also want to thank the staff for their responsiveness to members of the board for their questions around some specific details related to the budget. Before Susan begins, I want to frame the 2024-25 operating budget up this way. As a reminder, a budget is a broad sketch of what an institution will pursue during the next 12 months, beginning July 1. It's not set in stone. There are differences between budgets and actuals, and we have worked really hard to get to a place where we had a set of choices to make as we prepared this budget. I want to outline a few of those for you because they're crucial. I will for those of you who were not here, take you back to the summer of 2017. For those of you who may recall, the conversation that year was difficult around budgets because what I and many people were not aware of was a significant use of carry forward to fill a budget challenge the university had been facing. The institution began using carry forward as a budget plug in 2005. I will tell you, that is poor budgetary practice. And one of the things we worked toward in that first year was a plan to be able to address carry forward and eliminate that practice from our budget. We got close, and then COVID happened. And so what we had to decide this year is, do we take this year and a little bit next year as the opportunity to finally do away with carry forward as a budget? And we had some opportunity because of both appropriations, the turnaround in enrollment, and the state appropriation to be able to do some things and make some choices that will put us really finally on a solid conservative budgetary footing. So that's the first choice that we made in this budget. The second that we had to do was think about the way in which we adjusted the budget. Once we've taken care of that carry forward, how do you adjust the budget to actuals? when you have carry forward in a budget, if you spend those dollars, your current year revenue will be less than your current year expenditures, which creates a spending deficit, which we obviously want to avoid as an institution. So eliminating that carry forward eliminates that deficit. But at the same time, if you eliminate the carry forward, you also have to adjust your budget numbers down to actuals, which is what we've done. This is solid, conservative, fiscally prudent budgeting. And we've managed to do that while at the same time creating a 2% salary pool for our faculty and staff. And perhaps most importantly, having a budget next year that is 1% higher after all of that work than it is this year. There is no budget reduction. There's budget reallocation. And so we've had important conversations with the deans, with leadership. And the last thing I will say is that it is challenging sometimes to want to have answers to questions that are not specifically answered today. And I'll use a couple examples of that. There are some items in the budget around which some of the questions we've received this week that we've all spent significant time answering. And they're the right questions. And the answer sometimes is not fulfilling. So how are you going to allocate 7.5% targeted readjustments? Well, the answer is today, I can't tell you. That's a management and leadership decision that we're going to work through during the course of the next several and multiple months. You want leadership to have that flexibility. And the reason you want them to have that flexibility is if you force the hand today, leadership has to make choices that otherwise they might not want to make. And so with that, I'm encouraged by the questions we've had to staff, to our deans, to Ronaldo, to everyone. Thank you for the time you spent really helping educate and move the conversation forward. I am proud of what this budget does for our institution. And I think for those of you who remember the conversation 7 years ago, you should be proud as well. And I appreciate your support. And with that, Susan.
I think you just covered my presentation.
I'm sorry. I do the tactical stuff. That's the strategic.
So thank you all. And I've got my colleague and partner in budgeting with me, Provost Fisher, to help us talk through particularly some academic related issues. So I think this is presentation number 9 or 10 for the week. So if I get a little shaky, you all will understand why. So first, we'll quickly go over an executive summary. We'll talk about the ramp report summary for the fiscal year 25, which is a good news story. Revenue highlights, expenditure highlights, and next steps after today. So budget recommendations and approvals. These are kind of like the overarching approvals that you as a board will be making when approving this budget. So first, we are recommending a 2% tuition increase. And this is in accordance with CPE parameters. If you remember right, 2 years ago, they set a 5% upward cap. Last year, we went up 3%. This year, we're recommending a 2%. And again, the CPE will take action on that tuition increase on Monday. And then the full CPE meeting is actually on our campus next, I guess, maybe a couple of weeks down the road. 2% salary pool to our faculty and staff that will be distributed in January of 25. The distribution is one of the items that the president talked about. That's not been decided how it will be distributed at this point. In the past, we've asked the BEC, the Budget Executive Committee, to make some recommendations around that. A big 20% increase in employer-based health insurance. So the university is picking up of the full cost. We're picking up 20% of the health insurance increases. We also, as you all know, over the past couple of years, I've talked to the board about, unfortunately, high inflation and the fact that we have not adjusted anybody's budget based on that inflation. So this year we were able, working with the deans and vice presidents, to identify a $600,000 goal, which again, another item that will be decided on and distributed later. And finally, and most importantly, as the president talked about, our budget realignment strategy. So I think this, in my opinion, is a great budget. We have 6 overarching budget priorities. And the first is commitment to students, which is first and foremost on our minds. And with that, we're keeping college affordable for our students. And at the same time, revising our financial aid assistance strategy, which is very, very important. John Mark and his team are leading those efforts, and we're making good progress, and we're going to see even more progress as we move forward. Commitment to our faculty and staff, the continued commitment that Dr. Cavoni made several years ago that we would include raise a salary increase pool in the budget. And again, as I said, we've included the 2% in this budget we're presenting to you today. Commitment to academics and research. I have learned it's best to stay within my swim lanes, and this is the gentleman that I think that can talk to these 2 budget priorities.
Yeah, one of them is new academic programs. As you've seen come forward, we've had new academic programs come forward, but really modern programs. Those being such programs as neuroscience and data science, as well as a large number of certificates that are open to our people, but also open to adult learners to retool adult learners. And in that regard, we've also seen they're stackable, which is what everybody thinks the future is. And I think the future is because people will go in and out of college and they need to be able to get the certificates and stack them to get degrees. And I think we've done a great job in the colleges as we move forward to modernize the curriculum. The reason it's in the budget is at times when we put these new programs in, it's going to cost us some dollars to put these new programs in and to maybe get 1 or 2 faculty as well as equipment and other things needed for those programs to take off. At the other side, we talk about research. We've talked now for a year about R2. As we move towards R2, and what you see is we've had almost a $4 million increase in grants. And we'll know in February of 2025, they use the data that's put in to NSF to make those decisions. But what we've seen is that what comes with that research is more hands-on activity, more applied opportunities for our students. And a modern curriculum has lots of experiential learning in it. And that's really the niche that makes us different from the other institutions in this state. So all those combined with the budget and being able to add dollars here and there will allow us to form a niche and to continue to grow as we have over, we hope over the next 2 years.
And our final 2 priorities, commitment to our university. So again, as I talked about the inflationary fixed cost increases, we've evaluated them over time across the university, and we're ready to probably not address all of them, but we do have that pool of funds to address some of them. And then most importantly, as the president pointed out, is the budget realignment strategy. I can't overstate. I know I've spent a good bit of time over the past week talking to our finance chair, Chair Brody, about the importance of this. And I just can't overstate for the sustainability of the university. So going into the detail of the budget realignment strategy. So as the president said earlier, from the research we can tell that Ronaldo and Brian did, this practice of budgeting carry forward as revenue is a practice that goes back to 2005. And that is simply, without a doubt, not good budgeting practice. Carry forward is not revenue. It's simply cash. Secondly, again, the president addressed this a bit when he came to campus back in 2017 and developing his first budget, the fiscal year 2018. He really began very hard work to adopt a fiscally conservative budget. The good news is, through that hard work, as difficult as it was before I came, but I've heard how difficult it was, we were able to correct at least half of the problem at that point. I came in July of 2019, and I started working on the 20 budget immediately. And we were ready to start looking at how we were going to move forward to correct the rest of the budget. Then the pandemic hit. And I think, as we all know, that paused just about everything across the world. And at that point, I think it's fair to say that our primary concern was how we were going to teach classes, how we were going to charge students, all of these things, and the budget basically just paused. And this is a really important note, and I want the board to understand this. Not only did COVID bring about all these uncertainties, if you'll remember right, the federal government put in a lot of money into universities during that time. It's called HERF funding. And a lot of universities that you probably read about today in the Chronicle are closing. And one of the reasons is that HERF funding. They became very, very dependent on HERF funding. And now all of a sudden it's expired and they're kind of scratching their head saying, okay, where do we go now? Fortunately, our campus did not do that. We did not become dependent on those funds, which is good. We used them strategically when we needed them to. Most of those were used for our students, but we did not become dependent. So that we can check that box. Second, as the president said, we reversed a decade-long enrollment decline and associated revenue decline. Check that box. And third, which is also very important, we fully implemented the ramp model. That was not easy for campus. That was not easy for the deans, the VPs, our faculty, but we did it. We came together as a campus community, and we're going into our third full year of what we call our version of RCM ramp. So with all these things behind us, we felt as if we are now poised to take that final step to correct the budget, and which will fully engage in overall best budgetary practices. So this is another important note. The budget realignment strategy results in a spending plan that closely resembles what we're doing in our current fiscal year. And actually, slightly better. We were asking units to spend 92%, and this budget will be realigning their budgets down to 92.5%. So this is the cornerstone of good budgeting. And I know everyone understands this, but I just want to lay it out. You have to set your actual revenue first and let your expenditures be driven from the revenue, not the other way around. And unfortunately, our campus had been doing that practice for a number of years, letting the expenditures drive the revenue set. And then as we did, and as we started this year, we began monthly monitoring of revenue and expenditures at the unit level with our deans and vice presidents, not to be punitive, but to be helpful, making sure that everyone stays within the guardrails. And if it appears that a unit is getting out of line, we would meet with them, talk to them, give them some strategies of how they may pull things back in. Again, with the agreement between our deans and our vice presidents, what we will do once our fall and spring enrollments become final, if we need to do any budget resets at that point, that's when we will do them. So let me explain this. This is a 2-year plan, and we have to realign our budget by 24 million. And we will address 18 million of that in the 25 budget that we're presenting to you today. That's primarily made up of 2 different components. The 7.5% unit realignment that I talked about, and then the 10% overhead charge out to auxiliaries and revenue generating units. The remaining of about 6 million will be addressed as we start developing this 26 budget. And it's to the chagrin of Ronaldo and Brian, I've told them, once the ink is dry on this budget, we'll start working on the 26 budget. I'd like to get this done earlier. There were a lot of challenges with this year. I know in John Mark's area, the lateness of the FAFSA and trying to get our enrollments as close as we could before we actually finished up the budget. It was just really, really important. And also, most universities find themselves at this point in time because you don't want to be announcing tuition increases during the legislative session. Because what happens if the legislators may change appropriation decisions made based on what a university might do with their tuition revenue. So most universities are right where we are in this week, approving a budget. So moving on to the kind of the overall factors that influence the 25 budget. So the revenue adjustment, as I talked about, that's 16.4 million. There was 13.6 million in carry forward that was budgeted on the revenue side. That's the 13.6. When I came to campus, that's the first question I asked. What is that 13.6? And found out what it was. It was carry forward. And then, and I'm gonna let Bud talk a little bit about this because I think this is good use. So there's strategic ways and non-strategic ways to use cash. And ramp subvention, I believe, was an excellent way of using some of the cash we had in our coffers. And that was to keep from having to cut academic units that were in deficits. So we used about 3.9 in cash to fund a couple of our academic units. So glad you want.
Yeah, when we put the first ramp model in and we looked at, after we took the 13% from the 4 colleges, which is supposed to be used for subvention, which is to get them to zero. And then if there's money left over, give them extra money for having done a great job that year. What we found is that we were 3.9% short. So we were 3.9% still in the hole at the end of that first and second year. So not as much in the second year, just a little. And what I had to do is I went to the president and said, we're 3.9 short. I need to borrow from cash, but I guarantee you that we have a 3-year plan that will get us out of this. And will get us to good by 3 years. And at that point, the 13% will cover all losses, and there'll be money left over to give money to the colleges. And I can happily say that it worked, thank God. And, and that's not me, that would be the deans who have done an excellent job at looking at how you do things more efficiently, how you do things in a better format, and how you increase revenue. And they have done a really good job at that. And what you'll see when we see the model is that we're good and we're able to subvent them to zero.
So I want to address this because this is crucial. When you talk about responsibility center management, decentralized budgeting, our ramp model, the decision around how you manage academic units rests with deans. They are the budget authority for those units. We look to them to make strategic choices about how they manage scarce resources. And they knew that we had a problem. Now, we didn't have a problem or didn't have a challenge across each of them. There were some, given the difference between expenditure and income, had larger issues. And so there were some deans who could have said, well, that's not my problem, but they didn't. And so I'm so proud of our team of deans that came together, sacrificed together, worked together, collaborated across silos, and made decisions that were in the best interest of the institution and got us to the place where we are today, which is where subvention is handled. And there are some places where we have additional dollars to invest. Do you want to talk about that, Bud?
Yeah.
Well,
I just would like to say what the president just said again. We spend a lot of time together, the deans and I, and I think whether that's good or bad, you'd have to ask that. But as we talked, where we started when we started with the ramp model was the only way this functioned is if we all work together and that we all truly understand this model and we figure out how to rise the boat of everyone. Because if you don't rise the boat of everyone, it doesn't work. And I can only say they have been awesome in that they got on board about that and have done some incredible work to make sure that we move this forward. And as you look today, everything they have seen this and got on board on even this budget as we look at it today. So it's been a long road to this, but we all knew we had to do this together, and that was all for the best of the university, you know. And it gets more and more shocking to me every day as I watch institutions go under, right? And I watched Birmingham Southern close their doors on a Friday, but they're still playing baseball on Saturday for a national championship, which is just too weird for me because they don't have the money to be alive anymore after 160 years. And what we do when we're talking all the time is thinking about what's the future look like and how do we leave a better future for the people that come after us.
And we'll get to that report just maybe in the next slide. So the adjustment on the expenditure side is approximately 4.8 million. Again, another couple of items that were in the budget when I got here, vacancy credits. Those at some point in time in the past, the decision was made to put a vacancy credit in the budget, and that basically says that they looked at vacancies across the entire university and budgeted that amount to remove all those vacancies. The problem with doing that is vacancies, number one, do not fall strategically. There may be in any one year some academic unit that has more vacancies than others, just attrition or people leaving. So it's not a strategic budgeting method. But secondly, most of those vacancies are now gone. And so either through, attrition or this and that, and then also some of the vacancies involve like deans and vice presidents. And as far as I know, we can't run a university without a dean of Ogden College. And that was one of the, when I got here, I don't think we had a line for the dean of Ogden. So we're adjusting that as well. There was also a item in the budget called university-wide reduction target. That was about 1.5 million. So the vacancy credit was budgeted at 3.3 million. The reduction target was at 1.5 million to total the 4.8. And then finally, when we developed the proposal that we're taking to you today, the fiscal year 25 budget, we found ourselves working with the budget executive committee needing about 3.7 million to balance this budget. That came through because of the 2% compensation pool, as I talked about, and the 20% employer funded health insurance contribution. But just to kind of give you some numbers, a 2% compensation increase pool is right around 2 million. That and the fringe benefits, associated fringe benefits with that increase. The employer-funded health insurance contribution is around 1.1 million. And the inflationary pool, again, as I talked about, is around 600,000. So, but here it is, ramp report. So this is the good news that Bud was talking about.
Yeah, as you look at it, you can see where it says participation fee payment. So that's the payment. And then you look at the margin between as below, and you can see that 4 of the 5 colleges are still in debt. In most ramp models, colleges are in debt. That's just the way it goes. But what's supposed to happen is the money you collected in the 13% should be able to cover that to get them back to 0. And in this case, it does. We're 1.1 over a little, but it's not over in paying the debt off. It's giving the money down at the bottom to give them, because one of the questions I get constantly on this campus is, where's the rewards as we do better? And I totally understand that question. That question makes complete sense to me. And I think if you go back through the budget, you'll find that there have been rewards in the bottom that have been given to colleges. It's one-time rewards, but it's an opportunity to kickstart something that the college would like to do. So we thought a good use of 1.1 million would be to reward these colleges who went from way over to where we are now, which is being able to be subvented with the money that we get in the 13%. And that I borrowed that now, and I have to figure out how to pay that back. But we will do that because it's important. There does need to be some reason to say, hey, you got some extra money because you did do a good job, that you did do what was asked of you. We did get out of this over a 3-year plan that we had, and you made the tough choices as deans on how to do that. So we are exactly where I would have hoped we would have been 3 years ago, and getting closer and closer. And what I can see in the future is that The 13% will be even less in these as we go forward. And we'll use less of it and there'll be more to give out to the colleges as one-time funds.
So the whole philosophy behind decentralized budgeting is that if we do the hard work, it creates an incentive for deans to make difficult choices because there's a reward associated with it. I want to in particular thank Terrence, who, if you look at those numbers, right?
Yeah, there's two of them.
There are a couple. Dave as well, who could have said, well, it's my money. I did all of the hard work. And the reality is they said, well, we're all in this together. Let's take the rewards that we've created and use that to share and have incentives and some freed up dollars for each of the deans. But as Bud referenced, as you continue to progress through the model, as the dollars recalibrate, rebalance themselves, everyone begins to win this way. And I think that finally being to a place where the incentive kicks in is where you're really going to see things start to move. We've already seen some of it. Our deans get it, but at this point, there are internal dollars within each of the colleges for them to challenge chairs. Hey, you want to do something special that you think is going to drive more revenue? Here's a little bit of money to invest in that. Let's go. And again, decision making at the unit level instead of having been done centrally.
Okay, so now we'll just move into our revenue highlights. So as you can see, it's very clear from this pie chart that our tuition and fees, we are an extremely tuition dependent institution, which is not unlike many institutions, but that's why we everyone reminds me when I say that we budgeted a freshman class in the current year of 2830. Brian corrected me this morning, so it's 2832. And so we actually really track every student and are very, very laser focused on our tuition and fee revenue, because that makes a huge difference for us. If the freshman class doesn't come in, if we lose students through not retaining them, it makes a big difference to the university. So what's good is, again, our overall enrollment is growing and our retention is just incredible. And that's kudos to the entire campus for that. State appropriation, about 22% of our budget. We were fortunate from the legislators to get a base increase, first time in many years. They actually put money into the base for the universities. So we are thankful for that. Grants and contracts, I'm going to go through these in more detail, so I won't. So as I said, so these are the numbers that we stay laser focused on. We had a retreat on Wednesday. The president each year now brings his group together to talk about enrollment and strategies and financial aid and all those things. It's a very strategic conversation. It was a great meeting. And but these are the types of things that we talk about. So for the 25 budget, our projected FTE is 13,626. That equates to a total head count of 17,038.
That does not include high school students.
Right.
No dual credit.
No dual credit.
So we're not inflating that number by including every person that breathes on campus. That number would be much higher if we included those dual credit high school students and Gatton students and all the other kinds of students that we have.
So the final assumption around the numbers, our first year students, freshman class, is projected to be 2925 for the fall. And that's an increase over, as I said earlier, 2832 that we budgeted in the current fiscal year. And all indications say that we will meet or exceed that goal at this point. So, John Mark shaking his head. That's good. So again, we are proposing a 2% tuition increase for fall 24, which is actually fiscal year 25. And the final bullet is great news for our campus. So as the president and the provost have talked about, so for the first time in over a decade, we saw an increase in degree-seeking students, and in this current fiscal year, and we expect that upward trend to continue into 25 and beyond.
Susan, so on the revenue, when you do tuition and fees, it says the change is 3% instead of 2%. Is that because of the fees that?
No, it's because of the increase in enrollment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just more students.
More students.
Yes. Not only in the freshman class, Melissa, but because of retention, we've got now most of our smaller class are through the pipeline. We've got one more bad year, right, to get through the pipeline, one more small class. And John Mark's gonna fix that problem. No pressure, John Mark. And so this breaks down the details of our state appropriation. So yeah, this is good news for us, but I do want to state that it's fair to say that while we are seeing increases in our base appropriation, a small decline in our performance funding, our KERS subsidy is going down again this year, about 1.7 million. The insurance premium they gave us money to cover that state tornado and flood insurance. It's going up about 2.2 million. And so the problem with that is there's a direct offset on the expenditure side. So it's really kind of a pass-through as funds go. Gatton Academy, a slight increase for them as well. Mesonet is flatlined for this year.
Did you see Sam's question?
You wanted to know the exact dollar amount. Do you all have, is that what you wanted? The exact, can you all give me the exact dollar amount of the tuition increase? The increase.
2%.
The 2%. Sam, we'll answer that question when I have it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So grants and contracts, this is another good slide for the institution. So as we shoot for that goal of R2 status, we're seeing a nice increase in our unit-based extramural funding of 3.7 million. So that's great news for our deans and our faculty. We're also seeing increases in our governmental financial aid in the form of Pell and CAP grants. Other revenue. Unfortunately, if you remember right, the good news, I think I presented last year, is we were able to develop a short-term investment strategy that the university had never had in the past, where we took a lot of our good cash and put it into short-term investments to generate approximately 4.1 million. Well, because of that use of carry forward and declining cash because of that, we're having to reset that budget and downward by about 1.3 million. So that is the primary driver of this category. And again, this just summarizes the revenue, what it looks like in the document we provided. So expenditure highlights. So on the revenue side, as we are a tuition dependent institution, on the expenditure side, we are labor heavy. Again, that's not unlike any other institution in the country. You have to have faculty to instruct your students, to do the research and to do the service. You need staff to support. So it's just labor intensive. That accounts for about 46% of our budget, the salaries and benefits. And this is how our personnel and benefits break down. So you'll see that faculty and staff salaries have gone up in this budget 5% over the prior year, which I think is excellent news for campus. There's been more of an increase on the staff side than there has on the faculty. Faculty tends to be averaging around a 2% increase if you were to break this down further, and staff more like I think it's around a 6 to 7% increase. Most of the increase in fringe benefits is associated with that employer-based health insurance increase of 20%. Bud and I had a meeting probably maybe a month ago, which is a bit of a depressing meeting about Dr. Bale. I'm sure you know what health insurance is doing these days. And so Bud and I have teamed up and we've got that on our list to see what we can do. We had a meeting with our vendors, our health insurance vendors, trying to figure out how we're going to move forward in this environment so that we can manage that. Financial aid. So The entire financial aid budget is increasing 8%. A small increase in institutional aid. Again, we're working on the strategy to start reducing that back. And then you'll see again the increases in the federal, Pell, and state cap. And this is what our expenditure summary looks like by category, again, as it's presented in your document. And questions? That's all I have. President Cody, I'm not sure, but if you have anything else.
Anybody have any questions?
I'll respond to Sam's question. It's not around total dollar amounts, but it's the tuition change. As I understand it, in 2023, full-time tuition would have been 11,436. And in 2024, 11,665. So it's a $229 increase, Sam. Good question, because we want to be mindful of that. I will say at the same time, if you look at our discount strategy that we're working on, some portion of that is offset with discount, either merit or targeted.
As someone that
Okay.
was here in
Thank you.
2017 to experience what I would term an imperfect storm that President Cavoni stepped into that eventually amounted to around a $40 million shortfall. To sit here today and see the work that's been done and the team that we have present today, and to decentralize this process, and to see the effort that's been made to make it even more transparent, I think is quite an achievement. And I am grateful for Susan, her staff, Bud, for doing the hard work that's put Western Kentucky University in a position not only to survive, but to thrive going forward. And not that I understand every intricate detail of a budget. I don't think that's my role to. But my fiduciary responsibility is to have people like you doing the work that you've done. And I think it's quite an accomplishment, and I think Western is poised for even greater things in the future because of it.
Thank you, Regent Bale.
It's not a question.
I want to address that because we always aim to get this in folks' hands 2 weeks or 10 days before the meeting. We got it a week out this year because we were really honed in on that number, making sure that asset completion, the Common App, all the things that were shifting around on that revenue were as dialed in as we could get it. But to your point, the level of detail, transparency, honesty, willingness to address difficult things. It was a surprise to this board to know where we were fiscally when I showed up in 2017. You know exactly where we are today. We may have quibbles over dollar here, dollar there, but the reality is we are clear with the board. We're clear and transparent with campus, and we try to explain the decision-making process in a way that's understandable as it occurs. And so, again, as someone who did not do this work in my previous lives, budgeting is not sexy, but it's crucial to the success of an institution. And I will say it again, I'm so thankful for the leadership team, executive leadership, but our academic leadership as well. They've done the hard work and it's paying off.
Regent Dennis.
Susan, and I think I asked you this before, but I'm sure you've covered it. Fiscal year 2025 on the expenditure side. That explains to me again that 23,974. where that comes from. Page. And I also want to say, I appreciate, you're speaking to us. And I do feel very much like it's very. It's not having an accounting degree, I don't understand.
43. What's 23 you own?
The 23 million?
23.
Okay, that's the actual alignment strategies. Okay, so let me.
You said 18 in 1 year.
18 in 1 year. So once we're finished with this budget, you'll be left with 6 million there,
Okay, so.
which will carry forward to the 26 year. And then, as I said, we're developing, we will be developing soon after this, the strategies that we want to implement in the 26 to clear the 6 million. And then after 26, we are in balance,
Actually in black.
in the black.
It only took 8 years.
Is that clear, Melissa?
Kind of, yes.
Regis Philip.
So I appreciate your comments being, we've had many discussions on the board about maintaining our fiduciary responsibility, what's strategic versus what's tactical. And absolutely agree with the parsing and modeling and delegated these decisions, these financial decisions down to the unit directors. I mean, that's the whole point of what we're doing here. But so just to, because this is not operating in a vacuum, we still haven't closed out this budget here. Right. And last year, when we asked for and got the fourth quarter spending, we saw on campus that there'd been a little bit of a spending spree. And so the first question I think we ought to ask as we're looking at this is, how are we wrapping up when we ask people to budget to 92%? How has that worked out? And I know we're not done, but where do you think we are right now?
So it's interesting that you asked, because Ronaldo finished the May numbers yesterday. And I think he caught me right before he went home, and he said, we had another great month, Susan. So we are now, by the end of May, we're about 6 million better than we were at this time last year. So we are closing the gap. Now, will we close it to 0? I can't say that with certainty, but I think we'll come, as I talked with Gary yesterday, I think we'll come very close. Very close. And that was our goal.
And the way, and to the campus community, I know the friction, for example, around using purchasing cards has been a challenge, but that's intentional. So I'll give you an example. We had to send flowers to Craig Cobain's funeral. And to do that out of my office, Kim Lancaster had to contact Central, fill out a form, get the card turned back on, know the exact amount, put the purchase through, get it taken care of, and then the card's closed again. That's a lot of work and inefficiency, except for one thing. It makes it difficult to spend money. And so I want to thank Susan and her team, not just for the extra processing work, but also for monitoring purchases, particularly as we get to the end of the fiscal year. And I want to thank our deans who did not, the old example of this is they did not fill up their closets with Xerox paper, which if they had the way he's worked, that extra dollars, well, let's just spend that all now because we need, because we're not going to get it back. And the reality is we've all been disciplined around that. The purchasing did not tick up as the way it did last year. And the other thing that we learned is around human behavior. We were doing that quarterly last year. And in the final quarter, we looked good in the first month of quarter 4. In the last month of quarter 4, people went on a buying spree. That has not occurred this year. So to everybody who's involved, thank you. And to the deans, every unit leader that has been conservative and judicious, I'm thankful for that.
So just to follow up then, so if last year we ended up with $11 million deficit. If we're about $6 million better, so we're about a $5 million deficit. And you said that we're looking to budget pretty much what we did this last year, and except it's gonna be 92.5% instead of 92. So that we weren't able to hit that this last year. We're assigning these as a budget reallocation strategy. So for example, the number I've roughly seen is $9.8 million to academic affairs that they might absorb as part of this. What's the ramifications going to be? We didn't quite get there this last year. and we're handling it in a different way this year. So using that as a goal, we didn't hit it, I guess, is what I'm asking about.
Well, we've got a month to go, and the spending really falls off at the end of May. The June spending, because we clamped down on everything. You can't put through a purchasing order. You can't open up a P card, essentially. Sorry, Martha. And so that number is going to come in very close to the target. And so the other thing that we'll have to do is, again, the difference between budget and actual. We're going to come back to you with the actual based upon how we closed the fourth quarter. And yeah, there is a 7.5% number for academic affairs. And, you know, I would always look to the provost and the deans to decide how that should be allocated across academic units, right? And it is to the tune of $9-point-something million.
Yes.
But it is taken out of a budget that is larger. So when you look at the budget, it's actually 1% larger than it was last year. Next year's spending for our academic units should feel about the same as it did this year.
So, okay.
I think the answer is, we don't know yet. We have to see what it ends like and then reevaluate, right? It's still a proposed budget that we've put in, that's the key, right? We still don't know what enrollment, if enrollment comes in 3,000, that takes care of anything that we would need to do, any of that kind of stuff.
Or retention ticks up to 80%.
Right, that's right. So we're sitting there waiting for numbers that we won't know until August, right? We're all gonna go out and, I mean, I sit at my desk waiting for the August numbers every time, because that's an important day for us to know where we are. And I mean, Ronaldo tells me we're headed in the right direction and we're headed towards the end. I believe that. I mean, we are headed in that regard, because I've watched spending decrease over the whole last 6 months. So I think we're there. And I think we'll take a look. I mean, are we gonna be perfect? I don't think anybody's ever perfect, but I think we're gonna be close.
So just to go back to the opening comments, strategic versus tactical, when we go over the subvention numbers in colleges and you're returning $1.8 colleges, and then we have a $9.8 million budget reallocation attack. One we're like, okay, you're proud about, you're showing to us, one we're not really. If we ask about it, it's tactical and one much bigger than the others. That's just why, I mean, just pushing back, like, we still have. My biggest concern looking at this is, you know, this campus, and I understand the need. I mean, you look at the cash on hand, what we're earning in interest, and you see the decline in that, and that is a real dollar decline that comes from decline in cash on hand. So I understand that there is a need to fix the issues that we have. However, speaking for some 2007, 2008, I think we've been in a budget realignment, budget reduction, budget cut since 2010. There's not a whole lot of fat left. There's, you know, I know there's this perception amongst the media, amongst people in the world. They look and they say academics are spending money like crazy on all kinds of things. And yet the reality is, and that's one of my roles on this board, is to bring in the reality of what's happening. People are buying their own supplies and bringing it in. People are living, and I'm not even talking about salary. I'm talking about what it's like in the offices, what it's like to do the work. We've had 15 years of state appropriations that have not increased, and in a constant state of budget cuts. And so we see this one. The first question I'm going to ask is, how are we going to do this without reducing faculty and staff? Is this going to result in reduction in force? Is this going to result in not fulfilling a line or lines that matter strategically as the deans try to do these new innovations that you talked about? Are they hamstrung by this? They cannot do that, because it seems like, where else are we going to get this money?
I think it's the right question. And look, higher education in the 21st century is exactly what you've described, comprehensive institutions across the United States. It is unpleasant. It is difficult. If you think about over time, the amount of money and that has been invested, coupled with the clampdown on tuition increases, we haven't even been able to keep up with inflationary pressures, not on the salary side, but on the expense side for the institution. It's like this at most other universities, except for the fact that we are being proactive, transparent, and dealing with it. And at the same time, making a commitment. Jay said to me the other day, since 2019, we have had how many salary increases? 7 salary increases because of our commitment to doing better. Is it enough? I wish it would be more. But the reality of it is that we're not in a state that if you look at investments, while I'm thankful for the capital investment, the asset preservation investment, we've not had to the base other than this year a significant increase. And performance funding shifts around based upon the vagaries of a model that is built as a pure growth model. And we've had conversations around, can you put efficiency into that? And so my answer to you around the dean's question, around what is this going to mean at the college level? That's the dean's choices, right? And each dean has the ability and the capacity to make choices about how it is they allocate those resources internally, including faculty lines and vacancies. Thinking about if someone leaves, do you refill that position? Are there dollars that you spend in place A instead of place Z? Because place Z is not a growth industry. And so again, in the RCM model, what I hope happens is that, and to be candid, Bud and the deans made a decision just the other day that the 7.5% was going to be allocated to each college as just 7.5% across the board. Now, some of that is a result of the questions and the pressure that was being placed on an answer to that 7.5%. They were considering sets of 1, 2, 3, 4 different models to deal with that, and the deans were working through it. And this is where I think we have to be cautious around pushing for answers to questions that are going to be answered during the course of a year versus, or the course of several months, versus before I vote, I want to know. And I appreciate wanting to know from a fiduciary perspective. You know what the broad swath is. But the push to 7.5% across the board and knowing how that was going to be distributed, and Shane, that was really one of your concerns. I get that. The decision that was made to do that across the board, in many ways, cost Gordon Ford College about $500,000 had it been done a different way. Now, to the deans, I'm thankful, and I'm thankful for you to be a good collaborator with our deans. But we could have done this over time in a way that would have had a different outcome. And that would have let the deans do their work. And so that's my caution. We want to be helpful, transparent, show you, but we don't want to force decision-making because of a timetable that isn't strategic and doesn't include the perspectives of those who know best how to make those allocation decisions. So, but I'll just pivot to you.
I guess I would say that we had a 4 model. We looked at 4 different models the other day. I believe in shared governance, and shared governance just doesn't mean with the faculty, it means with my deans. So we do a lot of decision making at the right level, and the right level who's going to have to make those discussions and figure out is the dean. So we had spent the last 3 weeks in my office developing. We had 2 developed. We developed 2 more to take a look at that. And at the premise of that was what you said, Shane, when I looked at what you wrote, was to make sure that we made sure that we weren't destroying, I'll use that term, but you didn't use it, but a college, right? Because you can't do that. I mean, there's no way we can put a model into place that helps 2 colleges but hurts 3. And there's no way you can put one that hurts 4 colleges and one gets away free. And we were talking about that because it's really important. It goes back to what I said earlier is we all have to be in this together. And if we're not in this together and we're not working together, you don't raise the boat and the boat doesn't get to where we want to be. So we spent some time the other day during the meeting that we were at for enrollment, and I showed them the models, and there were some winners and losers in each of the models. And I will say thank you to Gordon Ford. I will say huge thank to Siebes, who can be the winner in every one of the models because they're ahead in the ramp model and have figured out how to do efficiencies. But they looked at it and looked at the other colleges and said, hey, I need you guys to be better, but we know it's only been here a couple of years and we need you to move with us. And we're going to help you move with us so that in the future, we're all together. And that was how decisions are made. And that, I think that's how we have to make decisions. It's not up to me to make that decision because ultimately it is. And we do make the decision, but ultimately I have to talk to the people who it's gonna affect and who I have to work day to day in those climate that we create.
So before I yield, because I see Regent briefly has questions, I know some others, well, I just want to say I do sincerely appreciate the 2% salary pool contribution. And the healthcare contribution is badly needed. And I don't think that that committee is done with their work yet, how bad it's going to be this next year. And I know that is something that is affecting every organization, and it affects our faculty and staff. The last thing I would say is, as we on this particular issue, as you turn this over to the deans, I will go back to what I talked about last year. The RAMP model incentivizes academic units to go get students and to hold on to those students. And so far, the faculty have not been at that table. We're hiring people to do recruiting. We're hiring people to do student success. And I would have to use the word gutted faculty support in order to build up those areas. Graduate students, staff. I mean, I've even heard from the BEC one time that the $30,000 staff people that work for the faculty in the colleges, we got to find a way to cut those. We are now running departments, and imagine running a doctor's office with no staff person to help large departments of faculty and your doctors and people. That is a natural outgrowth of this, that people are going to go in the direction that we incentivize. And we are incentivizing student recruitment, student success, student retention. Somehow we keep missing the boat that faculty satisfaction, how faculty treat their students, is a part of that. So I put that on the provost as the chief academic officer to make sure that faculty, as the deans come to you and say, hey, I want to hire another budget person. Hey, I want to hire another recruiter. Hey, I want to hire another student success person. What investments are you making in your faculty? Because faculty workload has gone up, faculty support has gone down. And we all know the student needs have dramatically increased. So that would be my last comment. And that's just something to drive.
So the two answers is it isn't just recruiting, it's academic quality. I mean, I changed that a year ago and we've been on. And what we've seen associated with academic quality is we have about 52% of the new P&T documents in. So that people who come into this campus know exactly what they need to get promotion and tenure. And it sets metrics for everybody as they move forward, keep them engaged in what they really want to do, I hope, which is teach and do research and service. In addition to that, I have seen a large number of programs go back and begin to modernize and understand that recruitment comes from modernization of programs and the quality of the program and the applied side of that program. And I've seen a ton of that happen in the last year, and we will continue that. That's been I've been to 26 of 32 or 36 departments, and that's been what I've told them, right? We focused on recruitment and we will continue, but we need to move to quality because quality is the key as we move forward. And that means we have to think about how many faculty we have, what's their workload, how it fits. And I think what we put forward, the new workload policy, allows there to be flexibility so that everybody finds a role within the colleges as we move forward to be able to work. You know, the faculty, if you look closely at the faculty survey, I constantly hear workload's gone up, but the average faculty on this campus works less than 9 hours in classroom. And it was 8.8. So, and I think the year before was 8.7. So there's not been a huge gain when I look at those numbers. And when I look at numbers of how many faculty within colleges, there's been a change, but remember, there's been a 14% change in the number of students over the last 8 years. And there has not been, except for one college, a 14% decline in faculty. So the faculty has remained pretty positive, and so is staff and those types of things. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a comment, Susan. I think as far as a question, I've asked all the questions. I've asked you, I've asked Bernardo over the last week, several questions, and you tried your very best to answer. Bridget Dennison said she didn't have an accounting degree. It's hard to understand. I have an accounting degree. It's hard to understand. But I just want to make this comment. Because of the loss in 23, the units have felt pain in fiscal year 24. We're going to feel the same pain or maybe a little more in fiscal year 25, and it may be cut back to a third of that, but still an issue in fiscal 26. And then hopefully after that, it'll be over. But I just want to make the comment that I feel for all the units that have had to cut back. Great deal of pain.
I will go to the provost said. Enrollment decline began here 13 years ago. And we didn't make the hard choices around adjusting our workforce size to enrollment size. And if you look at the per student appropriation of faculty time or staff time, when students started going down, remember we had 3,000 students from Saudi Arabia here when that started, and then they were gone. Keeping the faculty the same size is what happens when you have that magnitude enrollment decline, because faculty are not a flexible workforce in several different ways. Number one, they're not on contracts, they're tenured. So there's a protection there. You can't shift a math faculty member to teach another English class. So there's inflexibility there. And so I understand, and I don't disagree that there's been a challenge around folks wanting additional resources invested in them. I've made a commitment. I've made good on the commitment that we'll have a salary pool increase every single year. I don't care what we have to do internally to reallocate resources, that will occur. And the reality is we all have had to sacrifice. I mean, the size of not just academic support staff. I look to Amanda and the size of her staff that's gone down over time, to the tune of 30%. Martha, your staff is down 2 people. Down 2 people.
I have 2 people.
We are. It's a process of, I'll use what Cheryl Stevens used to say. It's right sizing and adjusting to the size of our undergrad population that we did not do for a number of years. But as we turn, I think what you're beginning to see is we've made the commitment to faculty staff increases and we've made good on it. You're beginning to see a reinvestment at the college level that Bud has created. There are lines available to deans to offset when people depart. And we've made some of those hires and we're going to continue to do that. But it is a painful process. And when you get down to the department or program level, there are some programs, for example, that may have a small number of majors, but have a larger number, an outsized number of tenured faculty members. You can't just say, well, we're going to close that program. That takes time. You've got to give folks shots to grow them and to turn those things around. At the same time, if that doesn't occur, you have to make those tough decisions. And I think that's also where we are. Because if we don't, you have resources misaligned with where student need is. And that's where we have to go. It's slower than I like. To Rob Hale and the provost credit and our dean's credit and our department head's credit, they've looked at the alignment between enrollment and faculty workforce. More work to do there. But again, you can't just take from marketing and put it over in the art department. It doesn't work. Or vice versa.
Just a real quick follow-up. There's some areas on campus I'm really worried about. I'm not talking academics. The staffing, your example is one of them, and there's some other than financial areas and others that I think we have through people leaving voluntarily, other things, and not refilling those strategic deficiencies that worry me. Talk about this with the internal auditor and risk assessment side. I'm certainly not calling for staff reduction. That's a typical thing we hear about. Central is too big. I do not think that. I think as part of what we've done in the RCN model is we may be reaching some critical understaffing areas. So sorry, just to piggyback on that.
And thank you for having the staffs back. David?
Yeah, I put a question in the chat, but I'm going to assume it didn't get seen. I want to ask this question in a way that I understand that and I have a tremendous amount of respect for this process, and everybody has been great about answering questions this week to the extent that they feel like they either need to or can. And I understand that, and I understand the limitations on that, and I certainly don't want to there to be any inference that we don't respect that. But I do want to ask about the auxiliary and revenue dependent, and I'm going to call it a tax. The reason I want to ask about that is something that's new. It will take money out of academic and non-academic units on top of units that are non-academic that also are having a 7.5% reduction off the E&G indexes. So when we do the math on those, there could be a substantial amount that's reduced. Now, that doesn't necessarily affect the faculty, and it certainly puts money, more available money back into the academic side. But I asked a couple of different times over the last few meetings, how are we punishing people that are behaving badly on their individual indexes? And what I believe I'm seeing, and I want to be really clear on this is how I feel, is that everyone is being reduced. And I'm now speaking specifically about auxiliary and revenue dependent units, when the indexes that have operated in that fashion have not necessarily overspent, have been on good behavior, have been good stewards to the money that the university has provided. And also the 7.5%, while I've been told a couple of times here in this meeting that it's not punitive, it does reflect that units that are behaving badly are going to continue to be able to behave badly, and units that have behaved properly are going to continue to be penalized in the interest of let's make it all work. So I really just want to understand why this year, and that would be FY25, there's suddenly a 10% piece when that wasn't part of RAMP in previous years, and how that came about, because I don't remember any pre-discussion on that. I don't think the BEC had discussion on that. I don't know that the provost should have discussion on that if those aren't largely academic units. And also, well, I'll leave it there and we'll see what the response is. Sorry.
So the overhead charge is simply something that most universities charge auxiliaries and revenue dependent or revenue generating units, because they're using the facilities of the university. They're using the university's name, the brand, their services. And so, for example, at other institutions, that fee or taxes, as Regent briefly says, might go as high as 15, 16, 17%. Recognizing that the revenue dependent indexes themselves, those programs, are not being reduced or realigned, we decided to, and I'm saying we, I mean collectively, leadership with the deans, vice presidents, that we should assess those programs an overhead fee to recoup some of the costs. So the 10% is what we landed on. Now, I know, David, you have had some questions around how we're going to decide. So again, this is one of those things that we have not completely landed on at this point. We had a first discussion yesterday. We met with the budget managers across campus to start to go over this budget presentation, and then to start the discussions around how best to assess that. What is the most fair, equitable way? They, to be quite honest, that group brought up some really good examples of things that should not be touched. And so those are things we will consider, and we have to, if we have to readjust some strategies, we will readjust. But this was our first chance to get in front of that group. I said to the regents during the budget workshops that I would get with the budget managers, I would get with the deans and vice presidents and think about and talk about what is the best way to assess this.
So in the budget, it said all revenue dependent accounts and auxiliary accounts, but you're saying now there's going to be some conversation about that, because what I've been concerned about is that we hit some accounts with a 10% fee, and we just have to backfill that because they're maybe like the graduation account where we charge students per graduation, and it's a revenue dependent account. It's coming in as external funds, but yet it doesn't quite cover what graduation is. So we got to backfill it out of the provost budget. So if we hit them with a 10% fee, we just have to cover more.
It's not by account though, it's by unit, correct?
It said all.
No, it's down to the index level. And so it's something that Shane, we have to examine, and we haven't done that yet. And it's gonna be a process, working with the budget managers and working with the deans and vice presidents. So that's one of the, and again, as I told them yesterday, we've got a lot of work ahead of us over the next 3 weeks to get these things ironed out before we implement the new budget July 1.
So is that too optimistic then? I mean, just because it sounds like we got a lot of work to do to figure out which accounts we're gonna be able to do this with that don't cause more work, more problems. And I've already seen a budgetary amount we expect to collect from those. Is that, are we gonna be able to do that, or is that still gonna be in process this year?
I don't think, I mean, it's just, like I said, that's one of those items that we're still working through. I know that Regent Brinkley had a question of me last night or late yesterday afternoon, and I apologize, David, I did not see it until this morning, and then really preparing for this meeting, too busy to answer it adequately. So I want to explain, in full transparency to you as the board. So I guess it's not coincidental. It's just the fact that we have not raised parking fees in 5 years on campus. And yet deferred maintenance backlogs continue. We have about 2.5 million in deferred maintenance in parking lots and parking garages across campus that we have to address. And we paused that during COVID. And every year we've talked about a parking increase. This year, there are a couple of things that are in the strategies that relate to parking and transportation. Also, the transportation side of the equation. This body, maybe before some of you, approved the refurbishment of a bus. That's not an inexpensive task. It cost us $600,000 just to refurbish a bus. And we have to do that when you have buses on campus. And so the increase in the parking fee was not to offset the auxiliary. It had really the 300,000 is more a reduction in transportation. So we increased parking fees by 10%, which gave us about 140,000 additional revenue in parking that is going to go directly to the maintenance that we need to parking garages. I mean, there is one parking garage, one of our oldest ones on campus, that has some severe deficiencies, and it's getting to the point where there's safety issues in there. So David, again, I apologize for not answering that yesterday. I didn't see it until this morning.
Well, I'll just add.
I have something else.
I'm sorry, can I continue, Curry?
Yeah, yes, I said I believe you had something else.
Oh, sorry. I appreciate it. It's I'm not used to doing this on Zoom. Thanks for the answer. I just stress that because of the way the question, let me say this, the way the article presented the comment, it attributed at the simultaneous time to the 10%, that there would be a 10%. And also, forgive me if I'm wrong, but we've turned over facilities to a bus. I mean, that's managed by a different group now. We gifted our facilities to someone else, and there's a management contract for our buses. Is that not true?
It's the management of the drivers. The buses are still an asset of the universities.
And has there not been in the past a $950,000 pool of money related to the buses? Because that's what we've been given on budget reports before, is that there is a pool of money tied to buses.
Is reserving to the reserves.
Yes.
Yes, and that approval was from the May 21 meeting to use reserves for that. That transfer didn't occur. It was used in cash that year. And there's a fairly long backstory to that, but a lot of it is we still have those costs moving forward. The buses that we refurbished were 2004, 2005 buses. Our fleet continues to age, and we still have a need for maintaining that fleet.
Okay, I'm sorry. When that was presented, I thought we were told that we would work towards solvency and we wouldn't have to continue putting money in those types of issues if we signed on with this new group. That's
So the management contract with RITP Dev for the management of those services, that was all related to the operations piece. It did not include the capital equipment. We are continuing to have discussions with the city of Bowling Green related to what public transit looks like in the future. So that could still materialize. It's just not materialized today.
right, but you understand the increase in fees that directly goes to student cost. And when we see a 10% across the board on auxiliary units and revenue units, and I would point to, and again, I want to get off the whole parking and transportation piece because that was just something that showed up in a media report. Some of those units generate money so they won't have to go back to the university and ask for additional E&G funding. And they have operated efficiently that way for years. To me, and I'm just speaking about me, respectful of this body, it looks as if the university hasn't been able to find enough money other places, so they've now gone after these auxiliary and revenue accounts. And you can attribute what other universities do, that's easy, but we haven't historically done this. There's no record of this as part of history. And it looks as if this will hit those units harder than just the 7.5 E&G reduction, which is fine. I've never had a problem with that. We didn't have a problem last year when we were operating with an 8% sort of difference in reduction. But again, I had asked multiple times, why aren't we punishing the units that are behaving badly? And instead of that, we're going to now punish all the auxiliary units and the revenue units instead of just correcting where people have been overspending. I mean, help me understand that and I'll be quiet.
I'm not, so David is completely our understanding. If someone does not meet their targets, they will carry forward a deficit into the next year. That's what we've decided. And so that can save my units at this time. We are spending at a rate that is going to be below 92%. So I'm not exactly sure, but I don't know. And your units are performing pretty well. There's a few units that are not performing quite as well as others. But again, if there are units that end the year not within their target, they will carry forward that deficit. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That doesn't address why it's on the backs of the auxiliary and revenue dependents.
So in some ways, David, there are people who are in the auxiliaries and the revenue dependent that have not paid a dime to have buildings, maintenance, air conditioning, heating, and all the things that the colleges pay for in their 13%. And using WKU's name and likeness and using the business side of the house and all of those things, and have actually had that no cost to doing that. And in my mind, any business has a cost that should be charged at least some rate that would allow you to recoup some of what you use. And that's not really penalizing anybody. It's asking everybody to be in that same realm to pay for what they're using. And to me, that makes sense. And that's why we have to go through and why we don't have an exact answer for Shane and you at this point, because when Susan and I have talked to the deans and we've talked to the people, the budget managers, is they came up with areas that are kind of paying it. And that's why we'd like to go through one by one to get a better understanding of what each one is doing and how they're paying before we make a decision. And I
So-
think that's good budgeting in my mind at that point.
So I'm sorry, but this was part of ramp strategy then to eventually tax the auxiliary and revenue dependent units.
Well,
Because I don't remember reading that.
Well, I mean, I think if you go back and you look at the major places that have had it for long periods of time, they do that. Because you can't sit in a university building and use all university stuff without there being some revenue collected to pay for the facilities that are associated with that. and
But
all
I
the
think,
stuff.
David, that's a good point, that this is now completed year 3 of decentralized budgeting. Next year will be year 4. There are things that I think we've all learned about how this model functions, where it works well, where there are challenges. Deans occasionally ping me with what they like or don't like about how dollars flow through the model. Well, I think that has to be part of our conversation, and I think this is part of that, assessing what did we miss perhaps? Did we set the numbers at the right way? As we have a good sense of how funds flow throughout the model, we need to tweak certain places, I'm sure. And I think that's a conversation that we have to have during the next year or 2 years to kind of assess what we've done, what's worked, are there things we tweak? And I think this is one of those tweaks along the way that we missed at the outset. But I do think that, having BEC involved in that conversation, other stakeholders is going to be important for us to make sure that we just continue to dial this in, right?
Which gets to.
But just the last comment, and I'll be quiet, is remember, a lot of these units employ students. And when you start cutting the resources that they have, that will cost student opportunities. And when you raise fees, because I don't see a hard written rule that those units can't just raise the fee by 10%. You can say they can't, but we've already seen a unit that has. They can attribute it however they like, but that's actually happened. So I just want to be sure that we're not negatively impacting students, staff on services that we have had on this campus for a long time, because we can't meet a target in another way because other units refuse to spend less.
I was just gonna say, I've talked to a number of people who reached out to me the last 2 days since the budget came out. Those people in revenue generating accounts have all said, I understand overhead. I mean, especially those who've got grants before. We understand overhead. The questions have been, how are we gonna do this? Is it on revenues, expenses happening? What we can, and so that, as we've asked those questions, it's because people, and we're 3 weeks out.
That was the first discussion we had yesterday.
And so that's why I've been asking, is this optimistic that we think we can get, I saw 800,000 to the 2 different types of accounts. And we're putting that in as a budget realignment strategy, yet we're not really sure how we're do it yet. That's been my question.
I think as we get closer to August, September, we know what's occurred, the conversations have happened, that we get a sense of what the dollar totals are. And what you figure out is you get actual, right? And so again, budget to actuals, at least at the beginning of the year, is an important, not expenditures to actual, but this is where we thought we'd land. Here's the actual number, and the actual number for the community that does this work, it's not in a budget book. It goes into Axiom, right? And that's crucial to remember, that yes, there is a budget book. Yes, this is the broad painted picture. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, that's where the dollars, the one-to-one dollars all balance. It's the day-to-day, it's the quarter-to-quarter, it's the year-over-year. And again, we're going to have to, when we come back to you around, and this will be the first year, Susan and Gary, that we will actually have year-over-year actuals and both for expenditures and revenue. Never had that before because we don't think like a business, we think like a university. And I think that will help illuminate some of this too.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I had a question. So, I know a lot of students like really do rely on. Hold on, I'm turning my camera on. I know a lot of students really do rely on the ability to work on campus, whether it's an undergraduate or in graduate school. And I know that with all this budget concerns, there's also been the concern that, some students will lose that opportunity. So I just wanted to know if you guys had any, plans in place in case a unit did have to let go of some student workers, because I know you even said it in the slideshow, but student success and the student should always be the priority of, the whole entire university, whether that's at the faculty, staff, student level too, for me, and obviously the board. And so I just want to make sure that the student concerns are still being heard, still being met, and that a lot of students won't have to lose that opportunity, because there's students that are on campus that don't have a car, that are from another country, all kinds of stuff that rely on the ability to work, whether in the food group or just like a front desk at a unit or just an assistantship somewhere. And I would just hate for the students to lose that opportunity to not only get back to the university, but to gain skills and experience in their field that will help benefit their career in the future.
Sam, I'm going to jump in here because I think that particularly around graduate students, there's a tremendous opportunity, and I'll let other people talk about the undergraduates. The first, I know that there are a number every year of student worker positions that go unfilled. So I just will say this out loud. If you know of a student that needs a job, there are plenty of jobs on campus for student workers that we never get to fill. And so I think that as you hear those things, we got to make sure there's better alignment between openings, folks who need that on-campus work. That's number one. But number two, and this goes to our academic deans and our programs and the way in which we're managing our workforce. One of the most valuable experiences I had in my career was as a graduate student here at WKU. And for the 3 semesters I was a graduate student, I taught 2 courses in public speaking each semester. I learned how to be a teaching professor through that experience and through that mentorship that I got. We have got to think about strategically, as we move to R2 status and we're a more intensive research institution, how are we creating experiences for our graduate students that aren't just, I'm working on research, that's one portion of it, or I have a job. It's actually about how do we use that to create additional instructional sections that are managed by and mentored by a full-time faculty member, but allow those folks to have the experience that sets them up for success in the future. And I will tell you that the reason I was a good professor is that I had good management of me as a graduate student instructor. And that was the only graduate student instruction or only instructional experience I had as a graduate student. I didn't get that in an R1. And so I think that a combination of those things, we're going to continue to move toward in a way that is healthy for our graduate students. And
Okay, awesome. Thank you for answering that.
Any other questions or comments from anybody?
I'd just say before we take a vote, echo what Regent Ronnie said. When I look at this budget, and I've been innocent pointing to a large negative number in this, I see a tough year on campus. And I'm not sure as we work through and let people make strategic choices of how to do this, whatever we want, this looks like a tough year on campus. And the legislature and others, they have these ideas of what we do. Somehow we need to work on that perception. Things have to change. The CP won't allow us to raise tuition. They have their student affordability goal. The legislature thinks we're doing one thing and we're doing something else. We're getting squeezed here. And this year, as we realign our budget, I see.
With recognition that this is not a time for sanguinity in higher education at WKU or anywhere else, I make a motion that we approve the 2024-25 operating budget.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Before we do that, is there any way I could ask one more question that I forgot to ask?
I think we need to defer to our region who's trying to communicate by Zoom with some difficulty. What can we do for you, Mr. Kurtz?
I was just wondering, this is just something I guess that I should have asked in the budget meeting on Tuesday, but I was just curious with the student enrollment and experience portion of the budget being those funds being handled I was just wondering if the Student Government Association budget would remain the same as it did last year. And then that just because I really do believe in what we do, obviously. And so I would love to, keep that same budget we had last year. And I was just curious on that before we voted.
Sam, you and I have had that conversation we had last year, and I'll make that commitment to you again. You will not have to deal with the reduction target for student fees. I know last year some portion of it was appropriated, and it will remain constant for this year. So no budget cut for Sam and SGA.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Motion's been made to approve the 24-25 operating budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. A roll call vote has been requested. So, Madam Secretary, if you would call the roll.
All right. Regent Bell,
I've made the motion to approve.
Regent Ball. Approves. Regent Brinkley,
No.
Regent Brody,
Yes.
Regent Dennison. Yes. Chair Milliken,
Yes.
Regent Nichols. Yes. Regent Spiller,
No.
Secretary Thomas, yes. Vice Chair West
Yes.
and Regent Kurtz.
No.
Eight favor.
8 voting yes, 3 no, so the motion carries. All right, thank you. Do you want to take a break before we get into the lease business, or you want to go forward? Break.
Regent Dennison asked for a break, right?
You need a break? Okay. Well, let's just take a short one. Let's just take about a 5-minute break. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the authorization of the leased property. And I'll turn this over to our council for their presentation.
Good morning. There are two leases in your board material for people today. You will note there's only one corresponding action item because this is a true land swap. So the leases refer to each other and depend upon one another. Dr. Boney, would you like to introduce?
Thank you, Andrea. And Kyle's here as well. Thank you, Kyle, our outside counsel, for all of your work on getting us to this point. You all have heard me discuss the Innovation Campus and our goal to make it a true innovation campus and essentially the next big economic driver for the city, county, and region. And doing this in collaboration with the county, the city, the chamber, and our economic development organizations. This is a part of that evolving strategy. And what the land swap will do, or lease swap will do, is allow, number one, for a tremendous company to locate the entirety of its headquarters on our innovation campus property. And that creates synergies that are good for everyone else who already works there, and also sends a message that we're able to house and retain terrific corporate entities for the long term. But why the lease swap? Well, some of you may have seen, as you drive under the train trestle with Big Red on it and the Spirit Makes the Master, there's this beautiful, relatively newly constructed facility that Holly had there. And that proximity and that space essentially is going to be an extension of the space we have to expand the innovation campus. It's in a short-term way. It's as of today, a 6-year commitment. But as we find folks that we want to be even in closer proximity to WKU's main campus, that will open up opportunities for us. It's at no cost to the university, which is important. It is creating a deep partnership with Holly, deepening it and their leadership. And the last is there is a bit of space in that larger facility, not the new space. We have all of the new space, but there's an older manufacturing side that will give first WKU and some of our programs the ability to create either maker spaces or some sort of more industrially oriented activities. But going beyond that, as we continue to deepen the work we do with the city and the county and the chamber, it will create opportunities for them as well to, if there are folks who need space that might use that space in that facility, that we can partner on making it available to them. So long-term, it's ensuring that we have an asset that is important to the region, that is one for which we have first right of refusal. And this does all of that. Got to do okay, Andrew?
The board has been briefed on the material terms of the lease agreement.
Yes, I wanted to add that just so there wouldn't be any misunderstanding about this. Our council was present at the board meetings with the individual board members, and that we've gone through this in some detail with them prior to today, and discussed the terms of the lease and all of that. Does anybody have any questions? Concerning questions or comments? I would entertain a motion in that we approve the authorization to lease property as set forth in these leases and accompanying documents. I have a motion from Regent Dennison. I have a second. Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. Is anything else to come before this section of our agenda today? If not, let's move immediately into our committee meeting. If I can get the right stuff. Our first item on the agenda for the committee meeting would be academic affairs. Regent Bale, Chairman of Academic Affairs.
We have only one action item, and I'll ask our provost to talk about Dr. Little.
Yeah, we're looking for approval of the emeritus recommendation for Dr. Harold Little. Dr. Little spent 25 years on campus as both a faculty member and the department head of accounting. He was an excellent teacher, performed outstanding service at all levels to the university and the community. And to give you an idea, his service was to advocate for access and opportunity for underrepresented groups at WKU and in the community. And what he's known for is he led the first Gordon Ford College of Business DEI committee. So he's had a profound effect on this campus, and anybody I talked to about him found all I heard was he's a gentleman, a great guy, was committed to the university. And there was no bad words at all from anybody I talked to over the last 2 weeks. So I wish I would have met him because I've never met him, but he left in 2019, but he continues to be found on campus and in the community, and he's still active. So he's the perfect, what I think is to give emeritus status to.
So as someone who taught in the MBA program, Dr. Little would teach one of the first classes, accounting. Accounting, especially for the professional MBAs, those people who are coming in without any background, would be a challenge for people. And yet they universally loved Dr. Little, and he would win the outstanding MBA faculty member award every time he was eligible. And they get to my class and sing his praises always. And if you see him on campus, you'll see him with a great hat always.
I've had occasion to know Dr. Little over the years and was at a function recently with him. He is, in fact, a gentleman. This is an appropriate honor.
I'll add that he is an exemplar of what we hope for our faculty, and for what I see as someone who invested essentially his career and life in the institution. And even though he decided it was time to retire, that he maintains his connection, engagement, and commitment to the institution in many ways. So I'm thankful for this as well.
That said, I'll entertain a motion.
So
Second.
that's two.
Regent Nichols has made a motion, and do I hear a second? Regent Spiller, any further discussion? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes, and Mr. Chairman, that is.
Can I add one more thing? I guess I would love to take a moment of silence for Dr. Craig May. I mean, in my mind, he started the Honors College. You take him on? Oh, I didn't know it was on yours. I didn't look at yours today. Then I'll wait.
I mean, we can be silent now and I can talk later.
Okay. No, you're in charge. All right.
You can read the agenda.
I read mine.
The next item on the agenda is budget. Regent Brody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one request we have today is for the approval of the 2024, 2025 internal audit work plan, Mr. Bruce White.
Thank you, Chair Brody. So today I'm asking you to approve the audit plan for next fiscal year. The detailed plan is in your materials. It lists the projects. At a high level on first page, we've got 4 projects that are risk-based projects, 2 that are required, and 1 that is a management request. In addition to those, we leave some time in our plan, we call it contingent time, for things that pop up, whether it be a request from the president, from management, from the board. We reserve some of that time so we're able to handle those requests throughout the year. On the second page of the plan, you'll see backup projects. We like to have an idea of what we might work on if we have no requests. So we try to budget for and plan for a lot of different contingencies in what we're doing. Additionally, on the second page, you'll see where we plan to spend our time. About 2/3 of our time, we're planning to spend on projects and follow-up. After that, our next biggest bucket is in operations. That's that's time that we need to do internal audit things. That includes our risk assessment, putting our audit plan together, coming to these meetings, preparing for these meetings, other operational meetings with management, so that we're staying connected with campus and we know what they're up to. And then also our quality assurance and improvement plan, where we're working on our own processes and working to make them better. Our next bucket is initiatives in education. That's where we need to keep going and doing our professional development conferences. Some of that is required through the certifications that we hold. Other parts of this bucket are promoting internal audit and our ethics and compliance hotline. I'll tell you later here in our quarterly update that I think that's been a very successful endeavor that we've had so far. And then finally, we've got advisory time, and that's where we're doing consultations. We're available for management to give us a call and talk through processes and be that sounding board, be that consultant for them. And then finally, the hotline administration. So when a call comes in, we can take that report in and do the appropriate investigative steps and go forward with that. So at a very high level, that's the work plan, and we're asking for your approval. I'm happy to ask any questions before doing so.
Anybody have any questions?
So let me ask one, not so much about this, but there was some conversation based on the external review that we might need to make some changes to bylaws about how the reporting structure works out. We have that.
I got you. I was going to provide more details in my quarterly update, but the quality assessment review, we completed the first week of May. That team is still putting together the final report. One of those recommendations, I believe, is going to be looking at the bylaws of the Finance and Budget Committee and what their responsibilities are and making sure those are listed in the bylaws in comparison to what our professional standards recommend.
Okay.
So when we get that report in the next month or so, I plan to work with Chair Brody and with General Counsel and see if there's something we can update with the meetings.
Okay, but just General Counsel and the board has discussed, we already have some bylaw things that we might be considering in the August meeting. So just
so we can work on that. Yes. Okay. We'll include it with that process. Thank you.
I'm looking towards the future. Need to make a motion. I entertain a motion to approve the 2024, 2025.
So moved.
Work plan. Motion by.
So moved.
David. A motion by Richard Brinkley. Second by Reggie Nickel. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I wanted to get my name in the minutes.
Gotcha. I'll call on Bruce Wiseman again to do some follow-up as far as his work.
Thank you very much. This is just our standard quarterly update that I wanted to give you all a couple minutes of what we've been doing here lately. Again, we'll touch on the audit plan and follow-up work that we've done, the hotline, other things, and then what's coming down the pike, because we're not going to see you guys until the October meeting, right? So it's going to be a little while. With the audit plan, we've spent 53% of our time working on projects and follow-up. So for next year, we've moved that target up to 65. This is the one area of where we've spent our time this year that I wish was higher. And the reason for that is our department management time has been a little bit higher as we've gone through the quality assessment review. We've worked on putting our policies and procedures in place, building the team, promoting internal audit, as we've had some good time in there. So next year, you can look for that time to increase. That's where we're moving from a strategic standpoint or operational standpoint. In regards to projects, we've got 6 completed and we've got 3 in progress with 2 remaining. So we've got 3 weeks left in the school year. The purchasing processes audit report, we've got a draft with management. We're working with them to finalize that. The travel policy and expense reimbursement, the work is done. Good work by our senior auditor, Caitlin, and our student intern, Ellen. I'm in the process of reviewing those work papers and we'll have them a draft report either by the end of June or early July. So those two will be complete basically by the end of the fiscal year. Global learning and study abroad, that is an in-progress project that we're working on. And because the world is not perfect, we're not going to have a perfect cutoff at the end of every fiscal year. So we'll continue our work into fiscal year 25 with that one. And then also we've got 2 remaining projects. Those got rolled over onto next year's plan, where we're going over to College of Education and Behavioral Sciences. That's actually on the plan, and the emergency preparedness and response was a backup project. So that's how our audit plan is basically shaped up for this fiscal year. From a follow-up perspective, I introduced you all to these concepts last quarter. The numbers are still relatively small. We haven't done a lot of audits, and management hasn't done a lot of implementing, but we've got some numbers, and the implementing numbers are going up. We've got 2 moderate, 2 low. I love to see that. That's great. Additionally, from an aging perspective, none of the audit observations have been outstanding more than a year. So I don't have any concerns here to report to the board. Everyone's working on the things that we've communicated in an audit report. So kudos to management so far. From the hotline perspective, we've had 10 hotline reports come in this year, and I'm really proud of that number. It compares to 3 last fiscal year. So we've more than tripled that. If you look at some benchmarking numbers, it's hard to guess how many hotline reports you should have. But if you look at the benchmarks, you could guess for a university our size, probably somewhere between 10 and 20. So I'm taking 10 as a win. That's good. We'll see as that continues to grow and the momentum grows, those numbers may continue to increase. We've closed 9 of those. 1 is in process. No concerns at this time that I feel like I need to make the board aware of, but we're working those cases as they come in. Finally, 2 reports since the April meeting came in, and we've closed 1 already. This is the slide you see every time. It's just a reminder, if you got any concerns, you can contact me directly or the hotline, either one. I'm not ever taking this slide out, Dr. Kalina, because you asked me the phone number one time and I didn't know what it was. So I'm ready.
We're a learning organization, aren't we, Bruce? There we go.
So Shane, I kind of gave you this update earlier. Our external review happened the first week of May. A big thank you to board members, the president, management who participated in that process. There were interviews conducted by this team. Others completed surveys. We did a lot of work internally between Caitlin and I to prepare the information for the external team to review. We've gotten the indication that we're going to receive the highest rating available, the generally conforms ranking, if you would call it that. We just haven't received a detailed report with the opportunities we have pretty deep in that. So again, this is that audit of the auditor, or it's the accreditation review of the audit team. You can look at it either way, but this is how we make sure we're meeting the professional standards for internal auditors and making sure we're doing a good job.
As I've come to learn over the years, the language of auditors generally conforms is about as exceptional as it gets. So outstanding.
Thank you.
I'll say outstanding. The organization.
Otherwise, we're generally conformed.
Yeah.
We'll take it. The last one on the slide here, consultations. We've completed 40 during this fiscal year, 15 since April. They've started to tick up a little bit, which is a great sign. And this is my favorite part of the job. I think this is where we really make an impact around campus and really add value. Our goal was 25 for this year, so we kind of blew that one out of the water. Next year, we're shooting for 50. So everybody on campus, please keep calling us. We're happy to help. In addition to campus awareness, thank you to Dr. Spiller for the invite to bring us into an accounting class over at Gordon Ford. We also spoke with the student publication staff meeting, and just that was letting people know what internal audit is and what we do and why we do it. So additionally, this week, Caitlin and I attended the Kentucky auditors meeting up in Lexington. It was a gathering of all the auditors at the universities. If you can imagine, generally conforms as the top ranking group of auditors. We had a really great time. And there we presented about artificial intelligence. We presented that same thing here at Professional Development Day. It was very well received, and I think it's really an indication of our team's leadership within the state of Kentucky from an internal audit perspective that we were chosen to present at that group. So looking ahead, we're going to be going to a professional development conference in September. This is the national conference, and again, we were selected to present one of the topics that we feel is important: attracting and retaining talent, a big risk at your university, how to manage it, and how to audit. So this falls into our initiatives category, and again, things that we feel are important to do that aren't audit projects, but contributions to the profession, and also maintaining our status within higher education and knowing what we should be looking for, should be doing as interim auditors. Any questions?
Further questions?
So you got your phone number up there, do you?
Thank you for your effort. Mr. Chair, this concludes the next budget committee.
Very good. Thank you so much. Regent Dennison, Student Affairs Committee.
I think that you don't have anything to present.
All right, then the next item is the Executive Committee. Action item number 1. Who is?
Chris, Regent Milliken, thank you. As the provost alluded to earlier, I wanted to take a moment and both reflect on and thank and remember a really important member of our community we lost the past couple of weeks. Dr. Craig Cobain was the founding executive director of the first honors college in the Commonwealth. And Craig had been struggling for a couple of years, managed to work up until the very last week, essentially, in the office, and loved this university, loved the Honors College, Mahoran Honors College, but most importantly, I would say, loved our students. And he would always ask them, "What's your big dream?" And to a T, some of them knew exactly where they were going. Others had no idea, but he pushed them. And he invested his entire professional life and career in this university and some of our most spectacular, overachieving, high-achieving students. And our community is so much better for him having been here, and this is a tremendous loss for us. But given the work that he did and the celebration of that work, I thought it would be appropriate for us to name the office suites after the founding executive director of the Mahoran Honors College. And so the executive committee has in front of them that request. We'll approve it finally, I hope, in August, and make sure that no matter who comes through those suites, they understand where it started, and who he was and how he cared about our Hilltoppers in a way that is an exemplar of what we aspire to be as a university.
Thank you, President Caboni. I will then entertain a motion to approve naming the office suites in Mahoran College for Dr. Cobain. So moved. Have a motion to have a second. Have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is an information item. Amanda, we're happy to hear from you.
Could I frame this up a little bit? This is an information item because these two policies come to the cabinet on Tuesday of this week. They're in draft form now. Any additions or revisions that Andrea Anderson has or other people might have in that meeting will come to you for a final approval in August. But I wanted to give you all a chance to see these for Amanda to talk about why this is an important move for the institution. And we'll have final approval in August.
Thank you, President Cavoni. And we've done our due diligence and already worked with Andrea on these policies. So I'm excited to bring them forward to our president's cabinet. Both of these are internal university policies, but as the president stated, they contain important information that we'll bring to you in August as context for approval. The first is the philanthropic and honorific naming policy and protocol. And that specific policy has been in existence for some time. We go through revisions from time to time, and the most significant revision happened following the Naming and Symbols Task Force in 2020. Out of that task force, it was recommended that we add a section to the naming and policies protocol that brings a review committee in at the appointment of the president whenever we're placing a name on a building, an academic college, or any significant opportunities across campus, just to make sure that we're doing all of our due diligence and research before placing names on those very important markers and symbols at our institution. There's a lot of guidelines through here about how we accept gifts, how we review gifts to consider naming opportunities. But the most significant update you'll see in there is that we are proposing an endowment minimum increase for the institution. We have had a $10,000 endowment minimum for some time at the institution. We're the only institution in the state to not have at least a $25,000 endowment minimum. It's something that the president and I have talked about for 5 years now. But we had to do the important work of first the WKU Foundation, the College Heights Foundation, bringing their work together under one umbrella. And then last summer, when you all approved the memorandum of understanding with the university, to make sure that we were separating our roles and what the foundation does, and then what the university does, and philanthropy and alumni engagement. So again, we'll share more details with you in August to officially approve that endowment minimum increase, which would take effect January 1, 2025, after we take this policy back to the cabinet next week for approval. The second policy you'll see is actually a brand new policy, and in reference to the MOU now between the foundation and the university, that's the philanthropic gift acceptance policy. Our foundations have had a gift acceptance policy in place for a long time. But again, this came out of necessity to define swim lanes and define what our gift acceptance policies are for the institution, and the importance of the university to establish our own policies and to make sure that we are all singing from the same playbook as an institution. It's important not only for just our internal workings for policy and procedure, but also just to define clear policy and procedure when accepting gifts from donors, so they understand what we might do with those gifts, why we might decline a gift, and what types of transactions that we engage in at the institution. Again, just reiterating the collaboration across campus, I think is really important. This policy outlines that all gift agreements must funnel through our office to make sure that all the appropriate language is included. When I came in 2019, there were various forms of gift agreements. There were some with no gift agreements. There were some things written on a credit card document. So we have done a lot of hard work in the last few years to really align all of that into clean documentation, consistent documentation to protect us and also the donor when they're making an important investment in the university. And then again, the endowment increase is stated in that document, which we hope to take effect January 1, 2025. That's an important piece of information that we'll need to communicate with our external constituents. So also part of bringing this to you all today as an information item is we will start talking with donors about that and the importance of why we need to increase our endowment minimum for investment in the institution. And I will plan to bring, again, some additional context and information to you all in August for approval when we speak to that item.
Let's say it made for interesting reading.
Well, let me give kudos both to Amanda, General Counsel, who worked really over the past several years to define and clarify relationships between the university and our partner organizations. I appreciate what the College Heights Foundation does for us as a processing organization, some portion of solicitation, but the clarity around the relationship and our expectations around who does what, when, and how is really important as we continue to mature our operations and to develop clarity around those relationships and what it means to have an engagement or a memorandum or of understanding or agreement with the institution. So, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate all the work on this.
Does anyone have any questions, or comments at this time? Recognizing that this is a draft. But with that in mind. Amanda, nobody has any questions for you.
It's very clear and concise, right?
Thank you. Well, as I say, it made for interesting reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one final item. Regent Ball, if you would come around with me, please, and President Boney. We're going right up here. Shall we get out of it? There we go. That's perfect. Is this good? That's good. On behalf of the university, this is just a small token of our appreciation for your service as a regent of this university. But we just want you to know we have appreciated you and appreciate the council in this matter. We thank you for your service to the university.
Thank you. I'm humbled and honored to have been a part of this. It's not been what I had envisioned 6 years ago. COVID hit, my husband's terminal illness hit, and I've Zoomed a lot more than I ever planned to, but I feel like the university's in such a great spot. And driving through campus this morning, I commend you on your leadership, all of you, and I've gotten to know so many great people. So it's been a wonderful experience, limited, much more than I would have liked, but I thank you all.
Regent Ball, you've been a tremendous supporter, investor, and champion for the university. And I too wish that we've been in person more, but you were ever present via Zoom, no matter what was going on.
Well,
and the diligence to do that, even from the difficult places you found yourself sometimes, I'm very appreciative.
Thank you.
We will miss you.
Thank you. I'm going to stay in touch.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn for the year, I'd like to say a couple of other things. First, I'd like to thank you for your leadership this year. And second, I would like to thank Regent Roddy for his leadership, because I know he's sits up with an awful lot. For those of you that don't know, being the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee is like another job. He has employees that report, and then he's got to deal with the staff region. And we wear him out as we do other people's wear as well. And then I'd also like to point out that this is Regent Brinkley last meeting. I know we recognized him last meeting. And I promised at that time that I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted to make sure he was here today. And I just wanted to thank him for educating me on the board. And I hope everyone recognizes what a fantastic advocate he has been for staff on this campus. I don't know, I tune into the staff Senate meetings. I learned so much from them, and I know he's had leadership in making sure that they stay on target and are able to give the president things that he can work on to improve staff life on this campus. And I've shared this with him. I'll share it with you. One of the funniest things that I heard from a member of this campus came from someone in leadership a few years ago who said, you know, it seems like you and the staff region are working together. And they said it like it was a bad thing. Like, well, yeah, I work with everyone on the board, but I absolutely work with the staff region and the student region to make sure that we are represented here. So again, just to recognize him for, it's very difficult. I know you all say often how we have such a tough job on campus. And there's questions we get sometimes from campus people asking, why don't we stand up for the president? And yet I know how much he does, how much he has, and how much we do. When you get hammered every day, as he does from people, we actually end up being the biggest advocate for the president because we are here constantly explaining what the board is doing, what the president's doing. And I see him do that and have witnessed that. So it is a tremendous amount of work that he's done, and just wanted to, as someone who saw it firsthand the last 3 years, make sure that I gave that shout out.
Well, I will join in and say to David, I appreciate your service. Both Shane and David stand up to and for the president, I will say. And David has been an interesting relationship. I'm thankful for your service, not only as a regent, which ends today, I guess, or sometime, but also the work you've done in public media. It reports directly to me. You have a career of which you should be tremendously proud. I know there may be other things to come in your future, but I hope a lot of them involve fishing and your family in person. And we look forward to celebrating your full career here, not just the time as regent in June on the 18th, as I recall. So congratulations, not just on your service as regent, but on your time as a member of our staff and the leadership you've created for our university and the brand you've created around public media. There's so much to be proud of and a career, and kudos well deserved.
Real quick, if I could just respond, I really appreciate the patience and support that the board has given me, especially in the beginning and the learning process, and at the end, when occasionally I feel like it's necessary to vote no. A no vote sometimes does not mean that I don't support the university or support the president or the SOF or the provost or anybody. What it means is that I care enough with the responsibility that I have to say what I think and what I feel. And, you know, I don't like leaving somewhere in a worse place than I found it. And I think we are in a much better place all across the university than certainly when I arrived and certainly over the last 6 years. Does that mean we don't have challenges? No. But it has been an absolute honor and thrill. And I want to stress what Shane says. You know, we are advocates for everything, fiduciary responsibility notwithstanding. It may not appear that we defend sometimes the administration to the level that we do, but we are fully supportive of it. And I really cannot think of a better honor than being able to serve on this board. It has been tremendous, and I really appreciate you all, every one of you. Thank you very much.
We're gonna miss you, David.
Well, some more than others. I love you
Does
guys.
anybody else have anything they'd like to say before we adjourn?
I would just like to say, I would just like to say one thing. I just wanted to thank Regent Brinkley as well for, when I came on the board, you were a big help to me. You gave me a lot of advice about voting, different things that I didn't know, when I came on the board, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, I'll say something too. I'll just say we've had lots of good discussions. And even vicariously, Regent Ball has been a stabilizing force the last 6 years on our board, and we'll miss both of you guys.
Yes.
Anything else? Meeting stands adjourned.